Hello, everyone. My name is Amanda Poss. I'm the gallery director at Hillsborough Community College. I'm delighted to have all of you here with us tonight as we celebrate the opening of our newest exhibition, Narrative Knower, presented by the artist collective Separate Checks. Our exhibition will be on view in Gallery221 at the HCC Del Mabry campus until December 10th, and you can visit it in person by appointment. We'll put a link in the chat for you so you can figure out how to make your appointment and see this really exciting show. Or you can go to our website to the visit page at any time to make your appointment. I just want to say a few quick notes about our Zoom meeting before we get started. So as you might have noticed, we are recording, and if you want to know right away when any of our new digital content is made available, all you need to do is follow us on YouTube at Gallery221 HCC. As we share images and our speaker videos, Zoom automatically creates a sidebar with attendee videos. If this disrupts your ability to see any of the presentation content, we recommend that you minimize the sidebar or change the way it appears by selecting the icon on the top left and changing it to speaker view. You might have also noticed that all of our participants tonight are muted. To talk to us, simply use the chat. I encourage you to really just type away, say hello, give a shout out if you're here supporting a particular artist from the collective, or to emphasize something that you saw or you heard that you particularly enjoyed, and especially ask questions. We'll have some time at the end, so leave your questions in the chat at any time, and we'll address them in the order in which they appear. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce to you Selena Roman. So Selena, you can unmute and bring in your video at any time. Selena is an instructor at HCC, a really fabulous professional fine artist, and a member of our gallery's advisory committee. So Selena, whenever you're ready, please say a few words of welcome.
Thank you, Amanda. Hi, everyone. So I'm involved. I've known a few of the members of Separate Checks. I feel like you guys for maybe a couple years now, if not a little more, particularly one person a lot longer. And so first of all, like Jonathan DeRofi, he was my student at the Art Institute in the photography program. Awesome student, just great like imagination and attention to detail. And then I think maybe through Jonathan joining the collective, I got to know Caitlin and Adam and seeing their work. So I wanted to just quickly speak about seeing the collective grow from these members, a lot of them from USF, the undergraduate program, seeing them really just take on their own identity after getting their degree and creating this mechanism for themselves to show their work, to give feedback, which is so important after graduating. And it's just been a treat to watch them. I think what blew me away the first time about the collective was their show, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. I want to say it was at the Ybor Creative Loafing event space. I think that was one of your first big shows. And it was so impressive, just the presentation, the engagement, you know, it was really a happening. And for them to do that so quickly after graduating was just hugely impressive. And so watching their work grow, and just this also testament to our digital age and social media. And I know a lot of their members communicate, right, you guys, with each other that way, and even getting new members through social media. Just how important it's become in the arts, and again, driving that not only engagement, but just commitment to each one's practice. So I've been really impressed with that. And so being on the advisory board of 221, I love that we can suggest or propose artists and shows for the gallery. So they were you guys were like one of the first ones I thought of to have a show here. And I was able to see the show recently. You guys are in for a treat. If you haven't seen the images already, I suggest you see it in person. It's so much better in person. I was blown away today by just the different approaches, seeing installation art, video, gosh, what else? 3D and like mixed media with the photographs. So just a really impressive show. I'm always impressed by this group. So I'm just excited that they're in an academic space and able to share their work and their thoughts on things. I hope I did you all well.
That was beautiful. I see a lot of smiling faces from the collective. So thank you so much, Selena, for that warm welcome and a little bit about your admiration and appreciation for these artists. I also have a few folks that I want to say thank you to before we begin. So first of all, thank you to the HCC Dale Mabry Student Government Association and the student activities for their support of the gallery. It's their contributions that make all of our exhibitions and programming possible. My thanks also to Dr. Alan Witt, our HCC Dale Mabry campus president, and also Amy Bousquet, who's the Dean of Associate in Arts, for their support of all things gallery and arts at our campus. We're so very, very, very grateful to have them. I'm also personally so appreciative and grateful for my gallery team, Emiliano Sedekasi, Michael Murphy, and our student worker, Mark Miller. They are each wonderful and invaluable individuals who helped to put this exhibition together, and some of whom are working behind the scenes tonight. Finally, of course, thank you to our artist collective, Separate Checks. Thank you for sharing your time and your talents and your expertise with us. I can't wait for our audience to get to know you just a little bit better. So at this point, I have a question for a few of the members that's really foundational that I'm sure some of our audience members are equally curious about. So how did the collective Separate Checks come into being? And I'll direct this first to Caitlin and Adam.
Hey, so thank you, Amanda, and thank you, Emiliano, and the rest of the gallery team for all your amazing work in putting this together. Thank you, Selena, for just sort of shepherding this entire show into being. So I would say Separate Checks. I mean, it started in 2017 with Caitlin and myself just getting together and really looking for a way, like sort of a structure to both create art and show art, within the Tampa community. And that was something that I had felt personally I was missing in my life after graduating the year prior from the USF School of Art and Art History. And Caitlin also had been taking classes at the School of Art and Art History. And she too was also looking for that sort of avenue to express herself and create work and just sort of rekindle that sense of community that you have in an academic environment.
Mm-hmm. And we come from different backgrounds. So I come from the advertising background and at the USF School of Mass Comm, and then Adam came from the art background at USF. So it was interesting, like we were stuck with these like 9-to-5 jobs and we stopped making work. And we were like, well, that's not good, because like Wendy Babcock, she was like, she's a professor at USF, and she told me that it's like my responsibility or any artist's responsibility to make work and make your own art past school, no matter if you are a BFA major, if you're an artist, it's your responsibility. So we also found that some of our friends were having issues where they stopped making and they felt stuck. And I mean, like the 20s are like, they're really weird. 30s can also be weird, I hear. So it's definitely like a limbo of in between of academic spaces and then like this real world you get thrown into. And through my first job, I met Jonathan, who went to AI, and that's where like the advertising, he did all of our branding for Separate Checks. So then it kind of just like through conversation and reaching out to our peers, we formed this group that was consistent and reliable. So it's a collective, not a club. Like clubs, you can have maximum members, everyone participates. This is a set group of people that we've learned to like learn each other's art, learn more about each other. Most of the members were strangers, not most, but some before. Yeah. And now I feel like we all know each other pretty well. So it's just really fun to see like it grow, and we didn't really have like an end goal. We just wanted to keep making.
Yeah, I know, just speaking for myself, one of my initial goals was beyond getting all these people together. I was like, it would be so cool to just have a show. And, that's not going to just magically happen, And so I think we were able to, once we had everyone together and it felt more like a real thing, we just said, we'll do our own show. And that's to what Selena was talking about earlier. Our first exhibition at the Creative Loafing Space in Ybor was just entirely put on by us. It was a one-night pop-up. We went in, installed, people came in for a couple hours, and then
it was gone.
Yeah.
And so this is our first real academic, tangible show since starting Separate Checks. So even though with COVID, a pandemic, everything and I'm sure it would have been different if it wasn't for all of that. And we'll get to that later, but it's been really cool to see it come to life. So that's.
Definitely took that mandate from your professor to heart, and you guys are working hard. You mentioned there's some people that you knew, some people that you didn't, and so I'd like to invite Erin, one of your other members, to speak to that, someone who was not familiar with Caitlin and Adam initially, but then joined on.
Hey, yeah, I'm Erin Castillo. I'm a Tampa-based photographer. I also went to USF, and I graduated with a degree from the School of Mass Communications, similarly to Caitlin. But yeah, I didn't really know too many people in the group. I joined shortly after moving back to Florida from out of state, and I was looking for a way to kind of get my work out there. And I don't remember exactly what I searched, but I was looking for some kind of art collective or a art group or something like that, and Separate Checks popped up, and I found their Instagram page, and I just messaged them and asked them if they were accepting work or accepting new members or things like that. And they actually had a meeting, I think it was a few days after I'd messaged them, and they invited me to that. And yeah, it's been a couple of years now, so yeah, I mean, I'm really glad that I sent that message and that the group was willing to bring on new members. It's been a really great way to both get work out there and also just to help each other push work even when we're not feeling the most creative. So it's been really cool.
Instagram message that changes. But I think that's a valuable note, because a lot of people are often a little too nervous or anxious to just cold call like that. But it really is a good example of how transformative that can be, and it can really create a sense of community with these other people that you didn't know to start with. There are other members who were known to Caitlin and Adam, so I'd like to turn it over to Andreas and McKenna to talk a little bit about that as well. Andreas or McKenna, whichever one of you wants to go first.
Oh, I can go first. Hi, my name is Andres. I'm a photographer and just, I guess, general artist. I'm a third year MFA at USF. And yeah, I joined the group from the very beginning. So I knew Adam and Caitlin from undergrad. I went to undergrad at USF, and we all kind of graduated right around the same time. And we were, we all kind of yearned for that experience of like not just working together in a space, but also talking about stuff and kind of working through maybe the like more difficult parts of making work. Sometimes if you're like accessing something personal, it can be a little bit, I don't know, difficult if you're just doing it by yourself. And photography specifically is so solitary sometimes. And if you're not like photographing people, if you're out just in the world, it can often be, you can get caught in an echo chamber, and that's kind of what was happening. So we all kind of banded together.
Thank you, Andreas. McKenna, would you like to chime in too?
Yeah, sure. I'm McKenna. I graduated from USF with Adam and Andres in 2016. I'm currently in my first precarious semester of grad school, pursuing my MFA at the University of Florida. But yeah, so at the time that Separate Checks kind of formed, I was living elsewhere. I was living in Nashville, Tennessee, but still very tied to this community that was formed within Tampa. I think that Tampa, the faculty at USF and Tampa as a whole, set this like really profound example of how necessary and generative a collection of people, a community of people really can be for something that is such a solitary experience sometimes, as Andres was talking about. And I think about this time, like that last 2 to 3 years of school, of living in Tampa, and I like could live in that forever, I think, in some ways, because it was so explorative and creative, and we were all so curious Adam and I would make galleries out of, like, from a cork board in between our studio, and it was Gallery PQ because we were studios P and Q. And so just like yearning to live in that again, and Separate Checks has become this movable space for, I think, that to embody. And it's become so much more, I think, than we anticipated originally. So when they, brought it to me, it was like this little lighthouse, and I like jumped because I was just so very excited, because I also wasn't making work, and this gave me like stability and accountability and things that I realized that were a through line through all of us.
I like that comment you made about this being very necessary and generative, the power of bringing people together in the collective, because as we both are echoing now, Andreas, that working, especially in art, can be very solitary, though I think post-COVID now, a lot of people can empathize with that feeling of being isolated and working in a very solitary manner. So thank you guys for talking a little bit about your collective and introducing that dynamic for our audience. Now I'd like to talk a little bit more about the title of the show, which is quite striking, Narrative Nowhere. This really hints at some kind of story that's being told, or histories, notions of the past, nostalgia. But paired with the word nowhere leads to a sense of displacement, of being no particular place, or perhaps many places at once, a shared experience maybe over time and geography. And there's a few artists whose work really resonates with these ideas. So I'd like to go back actually to Caitlin again to start us off talking about your work and how it relates to the exhibition's title.
Okay. Well, thank you for all of the previous, it's like a good reflection on what Separate Checks even is. I was like, oh, this is so nice. But so I make work particularly about my family and kind of like my adolescence and the place I never left. When you grow up, like you want to like go somewhere else, you want to see all these new things. And my parents both came here from, my mom's from California, my dad's from Massachusetts, and they met at my cousin's hotel. My dad was a lounge singer and my mom was working at like the reception desk. And so there's some weird, like how they started. And then they were kind of strange with like, they love antiquing and they loved, my dad had like, his home is filled with, he used to be a cruise director. So it's filled with all these like knickknacks and weird objects. So, long story short, he is a charter fisherman, was his next job. And so I grew up going on his boats with him my whole life. And I didn't realize how like normal everything that I saw to me was. Probably most people don't see every other weekend. So I do a lot, it's called light tackle, and he's his own business, like he owned his own business. So his speech when he gets on the phone is the same every single time he talks to someone about the different charters he offers, how it's light tackle sport fishing and things I just like have ingrained into my brain. So, and bait is really important because without bait, you can't catch something bigger. So he also makes it very like attainable. Oh, yes. So this is a Polaroid that I took of my dad's hand. We also are 42 years apart. So I feel like that's very strange to me sometimes. Not that we butt heads, but we have very different experiences. So the space in between is just wild sometimes. So, and the sun and the sea have weathered his hands. He's very fair skinned, but like leathery now. So in person, this kind of has more texture to it. And then bait is so like you want the fish to bleed to attract a bigger catch. And in a photo, it's always so harsh. And I had to take down on Instagram one photo that I have where it's a mackerel with a hook sticking out of its mouth. And it looks like if PETA saw it, like we'd be in trouble, but it was just in that moment that it looked so harsh. But really it's a second action and it gets thrown in the water. So I was really interested with that. And then the squid caught in the sky, which is this one on the right. And then the frame just mimics how wacky his house is. Like he has these kind of objects all around the house. Lots of fish on walls, like very interesting. So I like the framing and the comparison of like this small bait to a larger catch in the future. These are just things that I saw growing up. So I keep exploring it. It's not finished. And right now I haven't been able to get on the boat as much, but I'm excited to like keep exploring that, side of my childhood. So But yeah.
It's so lovely how you bring in and weave in your family's history into the narrative with these photos. Now I'd like to turn it over to Erin, whose work you have these strong connections with notions of the past. Will you share a little bit about your work?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so recently I've been exploring, a bit more of my family's history. And this work in particular focuses on the kind of disassociation I feel with some of my Cuban and Spanish heritage. Oftentimes, I'll say the phrase un poquito, which means a little bit. And it's kind of my canned response whenever someone asks me if I speak Spanish. So just a little bit, and it's really my way of saying no without flat out saying no. So the scanned images that you see there, they're old family photos, and in a lot of them I had no idea who was being photographed. And on the backs of them, I had to rely a lot on some like scratched, Spanish, and sometimes I'd be able to only pick out phrases or words or names and things like that. And so with the arrangement of the photos, I really wanted to kind of portray this this barrier that I feel purposely obscuring the older photos with some of the newer ones with people that I know, like my grandmother is in the left one, and both of those photos in the right one are of my father. So that's a little bit about the scanned photos. The sculptural piece is another part of this project and is a physical kind of representation of the title. Some of my great-grandparents worked in the cigar factories in Ybor City, stripping tobacco and rolling cigars and things like that. And I've got some really cool documentation of those things. And currently I use this cigar box and a couple of other ones to just kind of store everyday essential things like keys, wallet, pocket change, headphones, the things that you see there. And so it's kind of just like this small cultural anchor that I use every day without really thinking about it. And it's not lost on me that, as my partner pointed out, this particular box that I use all the time, this series of cigars is the white series. And so it's particularly poignant, but yeah, so that's a little bit about my project.
Oh, thank you. I like how you talk about you're vacillating between something that is known and unknown, something that is clear, and then a little bit obscured. There's another artist as well who operates in that similar space. So I'd like to invite Andreas to talk about his piece for the show.
Yeah, so I have two like panoramic, I would say like decals or wraps that are on the teeth in the gallery. So when I was making this work, it was kind of just, I was doing a lot of stuff that was in studio, and I was just like sitting on a computer for hours at a time. So I would just want to go and kind of go for a walk and photograph. And one of the things that I was like really, really drawn to was covered graffiti, painted over graffiti, because it's always done in like the wrong color, or just, it's just painted over so that you don't see the words and you don't actually have to think about what was there. You just think of this like blob kind of. And then this was earlier this year, and Donald Trump kind of is always at the forefront of my thoughts somehow, and not really in positive ways, unfortunately. But the title of the work is Muro Falso, and Muro Falso 1 and 2, which means fake walls in Spanish. Ultimately, these walls are made up of 15 to 20 photographs or more, and they're usually of a large amount of space. So what I do is I stitch them all together and let Photoshop or whatever other editing software I'm using to invent parts of the image. I purposely leave sections out and have it reinterpret what's going into the picture. And I don't know, I think of borders, I think of the kind of precariousness maybe of borders, and how there are these just invisible lines in the ground that we have to respect, and you can get arrested or potentially deported for. And it's just, yeah, I think it's all a construction, just like these images are. Ultimately.
So interesting you talk about feeling precarious because these decals feel so solid, but, and as you point out, are really this false space, an amalgamation of things that exist in reality. There's another artist who combines layers, different images and objects that I'd like to invite to speak now. So Erica, will you share a little about your work as well?
Of course. Hi, I'm Erica. I work in photography and I've been working more in mixed media lately. So this piece that I have created here for the show is called From Things Remembered. A lot of my work is centered in my experience as a young Black woman, as a mother of Black twins. So I'm thinking about the experience that I deal with or the fears that I have for my sons, and also how these things are embedded in us from our ancestors. And so this piece, where I took synthetic hair, which is typically used for braiding, to create these long braids that are extending out from that top frame. This is an ode to how braids in historic times for slaves were used as maps for the escape routes. So thinking about how that was our escape to freedom and how the sky and the clouds are typically thought of as this, you know, ode to being so open and free, where it's like, today, is our freedom really free, and how free are we? And the piece on the bottom relating to this, I wanted to show how the chains have been translated into something different for Black people, whereas in this same time frame, the chains were looked at as a sign of oppression or as a sign of lack of freedom, and where how they kind of turn into these gold chains, which is looked at as a sign of wealth or prosperity these days in our modern day culture. So I kind of wanted to play on these two ideas of how these typical moments of oppression or sadness or fear were turned into a sign of wealth or beauty nowadays.
Well, thank you for that. I love how you weave that story so well with the braids of the hair, ancestral memory and histories into something that's very, very poignant and powerful for especially what's going on today. Now, there are other works in this show that walk this line between the lived experience, very similar to what we've been hearing so far, but also with some humor and ventures into the realm sometimes of the absurd even, and kind of playfully teases at how we relate to other people. And so at this point, I'd like to invite Adam to share a little bit about his work and how it connects to that idea.
Hey, so I have two performance videos in this show, and one involves me reading a newspaper out on this open lawn, and there's water coming down on top of me. It's supposed to, you know, evoke rain, but it's a water hose. And so it kind of has this push and pull of, like, I think in the core of it, there is this serious sort of takeaway on my own feelings towards, you know, things like the current administration and what have you. But it also pokes fun at it in almost this Monty Python way of the water moving around, sometimes hitting me, sometimes not. And I'm trying to read the paper, even though it's becoming more and more impossible. And I read it until it literally is no more in my hands and I have nothing left. I think it's about a 5-minute exercise. And the other video that I have in this show is I guess you could call it a cover of a performance by this Dutch artist, Bastiaan Otter, who created a video in 1970. And his video is called I'm Too Sad to Tell You. And it's more or less this same setup. It's a close-up of him, and he's crying in front of the camera. No dialogue or anything, as the title would tell you. And I mean, I ended up making this work just as a response to, I mean, the year, obviously. We all are not having the best year of our lives, I'm sure. And I think we all need some form of just letting that out. And I had kind of toyed around with doing a Bastian Otter cover for a while now, and this seemed like an appropriate venue. And even the way it's displayed in the show, it's all very purposeful, where there's this small black curtained off area in the gallery, and the video is projected on the wall. And so not many people can fit in there. So it's almost like this intimate experience that you can have of just, you know, seeing me cry, and, you know, whatever emotions that evokes on you as a viewer, you're allowed to have in this safe, closed off space.
I like how you describe that push and pull in your work, and that element of vulnerability and also catharsis. And those like kind of intimate thoughts and feelings and emotions. And this brings me now to McKenna's work, which is, you know, it's a little about our inner life, but also how we relate to people and relationships in general. So McKenna?
Yeah, so I've been working with appropriated imagery from Tinder since like 2016, specifically my own Tinder account. And this has been like this slowly budding archive I look back to and continue to navigate in new ways. I've been so very entranced by this like absent presence where we are suspended within these digital spaces like dating apps such as Tinder and other social platforms. So in many ways that are ever stronger right now in this pandemic period, Tinder feels like a summation of my and maybe our collective generation, a time when this online presence that is us is always on display and always actively being groomed or curated, that for a person or an audience that is somewhat known but always unseen in some way behind this veil of a screen. So the things that we present ourselves, the things that we present within our chosen yet very vernacular images become us, while simultaneously I think that we become them. So after spending the past few years redacting all of the information within these photographs, I was presenting them with a white background, only showing the hands and the men holding their trophies. Trophies being these deer, duck, fish, gator, what have you. I've become interested in this new reconfiguration of the portrait and by its relationship to the whole. So I'm trying to like figure out how to question the nature of presentation by allowing something to be defined by its absence, and complicate one's relationship to the image by taking away those bodily references. So by taking away gesture, race, loosely gender, and just sitting in that more quiet contemplative space. So here on the wall, the print is large and confronting, but in a quiet, more like complicated by the wallpaper that's behind it. I think it's important to be aware of like the innumerable nature and presence of these images. And I wanted the wallpaper to reflect the archetype that I'm kind of like subliminally creating through looking at these, domestic but very harshly masculine. The goal of these apps is always to find love or sex or attention, or maybe feel less alone, intimate feelings with the goal of sharing a shared space with someone as individuals, and also right now as a culture. Yeah, and I'm never wanting to say that this method of presentation or the fact that we socially present ourselves in this suspended forever space is bad, but to question our perspectives of why we do it, how, and to recognize how that alters our like physical interactions and relationships.
I think the most poignant description of internet dating and the reflection that I've ever heard, especially this notion of being absent and present at the same time, suspended on this digital platform. And here we are sitting on, the irony isn't sort of lost on me. So speaking of these kind of like intimate spaces and relationship to place as well, I would like to invite Jessica to talk about her very unique, I'll say, contribution to the exhibition, relationships with others and self and Florida being described. So Jessica, whenever you're ready.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jess. Like was just stated, I have a poem in the show. I first wanted to say thank you for having us. This is really cool, in part because I'm getting to see people I love very much, sometimes for the first time since like March, which is sick. Um, but I wrote a poem for the show titled something like After 22 Years, I Finally Decide to Try to Love Florida. That's it. That's it. I was born and raised in Florida and I've never left. Caitlin was saying something about it earlier, how like if you're born here, you kind of always want to leave here. Um, and someone, I was talking to someone who was from Venezuela, and he was telling me how like he can't go back to his home for a number of reasons. And he pointed out that like it's an immense privilege that I have to be able to visit my childhood home whenever I want. And so I like towards the end of last year made like a personal like internal project, not an art project, but just like to myself, I was like, I'm going to try to love it here, or at least like it, even though it can be difficult. And that was where it started. There was an essay I read where someone wrote a line that said something along the lines of, the reasons I hate Florida are inherently the reasons I hate myself. And that became like integral to writing the poem. And yeah, the poem just happened after that. And I kind of hadn't thought about it too much this year until this week, actually, really. Seeing post-election, a lot of people just like writing off Florida and saying like, Florida's disappointed us again, has been like, I found myself very defensive because like real people live here. And there are real issues here, and people I love and care about are like trying to build a better world here. And it's been nice to like almost weirdly see this thing come full circle as people are getting to read the poem now. So that's sick. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Jess. And I think that's a good reminder. If you're able to come see the show, you can take a copy of Jess's poem with you as a little memento. But I think a lot of people can relate to that tension between, loving where you're from and being glad maybe that's where you're from and not you're someplace else, or, being someplace for your whole life and that yearning to go somewhere else, and this idea that somewhere else might be better. Now, there's some other works in the show that oscillate between a kind of scientific examination of natural phenomena or ephemera, or maybe even towards a particular place, and really lending itself more towards objectivity. And then there's others where it kind of goes on the other side of that. They're a little bit more fluid and subjective, hinting at a kind of wonder and discovery. So at this point, I'd like to invite Anna to talk about her work and how it relates to those ideas.
Hey, thank you. And thanks for having us. My name is Anna Dunwoody, and most of my work revolves around themes of a loss and rediscovery of self, growth, nature, and human connection in general. Lately, I've been working a lot with cyanotypes and wet cyanotype process. I think it's really fun to put my hand in the process, but honestly, I pick cyanotype as my process because it's the easiest one for me to do as a mom with a toddler. I don't have to be locked in a closet for a really long time. So, and she likes to make magic paper with me, so that's helpful. But I really love cyanotypes because each image, much like life, is very diverse and complex and organic and unpredictable, and a lot of times really frustrating to make, but they're always constantly surprising and occasionally really beautiful. So that's why I love the process. But Dioscorea bulbifera, or more commonly known as the air potato, is an invasive species in Florida that grows at a somewhat impressive rate of 8 inches per day, which makes it extremely invasive
and it smothers all of the native plants as well as trees. And I just really liked the juxtaposition of symbolism between a snake skin that was shed, which normally symbolizes like transformation and healing, and like growth and rebirth, with this like super noxious weed that kind of just takes over everything. And I think this year has been really hard for a lot of people for a lot of different reasons. And I just really felt like this work spoke to a lot of those themes.
And thank you for sharing that. I love that you gave us so beautifully the Latin and then the air potato, but it speaks to our experience in nature, and sometimes these things that are overlooked, but really can form such beautiful metaphors about how we exist in the world. Now I'd like to turn over to John, which this can seem like a totally different track for a second. We have more like digital images and overlapping, this kind of obfuscation of the image. So John, with that, I'd like you to go ahead and talk a little bit about your work.
Hi, my name is Jonathan. I graduated from the Art Institute of Tampa. I guess I would classify myself as a multimedia designer because I would do a lot of work in a lot of different fields. So what I tend to do is mix a lot of this together, which you can see within the work that I've presented today. So about what I've kind of come up with, it's both these pieces, they're called Imposter, and that's referring to imposter syndrome, which is a fairly interesting experience that people have, and I can say I've also gone through this, and it's not something that just goes away. It kind of comes and goes. But what imposter syndrome is, it's this idea, and I'll use this as my personal experience, but you're entering a job for the first time and never feeling that you're belonging, or as if they're going to catch you and you're going to be called out as a fraud. And this is, it's interesting. I've made a move within the last 2 years into the tech field as a web and app designer. And this is something that's relatable from one person to another within the tech field because it's so new. But the work itself, there's these figures within this 3D space, and they just kind of seem lost. And what they're kind of looking for is for validation or confirmation that you're doing great, you're doing fantastic. And this idea, putting it within a frame it's past. I think it's to make it more than in this individual person. A lot of people go through this. Some can't identify it because it's not something that's, I would say, is like classified, but it's just kind of a term or a feeling that's been overwhelming on the internet, at least, as imposter syndrome.
I think a lot of people can relate to that, and there's this, and right now that search for affirmation and validation, I think a lot of us, given what's going on today, that's something a lot of us can feel. But I think between Anna's work and yours, there's this idea of like partial images and overlapping, and we get both sort of a hint at what it's seen, but also we're kind of kept from the full story, so we have to imagine the rest of it, which brings me into very nicely Christy's work. So Christy, will you join in and tell us a little bit about your work for the show?
Hello, I'm Christy Summerson. I am a photographer and illustrator from Tampa. I, like many others, graduated from USF with my BFA in 2017. Currently working in advertising. The work that I have in this show is just a short documentation of this particular phase in my life that I've captured through photography and by layering physical pieces of myself and appropriated text from a part of my past. The two photographs on the left are collectively titled West Columbus Drive, which is my current street address. Both of the images are long exposures that were taken at night from the inside of my apartment, and they face out towards some of its very few windows. I'm currently living alone for the first time and feel further isolated just from working from home for so long, as many people I'm sure have been. I chose to take these images as long exposures with a tripod as a way to kind of work around a shoulder injury and surgery that I recently had. The mixed media piece on the right-hand side is titled Upheaval, and it combines handmade paper and my own hair. And those are also included with a poem that I pulled from a blog that my best friend was maintaining before she passed away in 2014. I use her writing as inspiration for a lot of my work, since she and I had collaborated a lot creatively before she passed away. And it's comforting to me to be able to continue to reference her writing and keep it alive and in front of people. There are chunks of my recently dyed hair obscuring parts of the text in reference to these repeating lines in the poem that that are talking about how like she was doing laundry when she was writing this poem, and there are a lot of lines about the hair being blown into her face and her annoyance with it. And I just kind of resonated with like the monotony of that task, and it felt like something that it accurately like describes my feelings towards this part of my life.
I think that's a lovely homage, and kind of speaks to how people can have such an important impact on our lives, and the hair being a way to emphasize that repetition in the poem. We're getting close to time for a Q&A, so I'd like to remind our participants tonight that you can at any time now put your questions into the chat. While we do that, we had prepared another question for the collective, and a few members had expressed strong interest in responding to this. So how have the events of this past year in the wake of COVID-19, Black Lives Matter, the election, and other significant events from 2020, how has this all impacted your work?
So I'll start by saying, I mean, the biggest thing is the show itself was supposed to, take place early in the year, and we were going to invite other artists from across the country to participate in the show. And then, everything came to a halt. Like everything that we knew as normal changed. And so I feel like the show has taken on this different identity of some of the work has just naturally become charged due to a lot of the large issues we're seeing, whether it be COVID or racial injustice or the election and all of the baggage that comes when you think of those. And I feel like now the show has also taken on, like, people's work has had to change and the ideas behind their work has changed. And so now I feel like Narrative Nowhere has become these little snapshots of people's lives or where they're at right now. And so when you see all the work together and you walk around the space, it's almost like this daydream quality of seeing all these different puzzle pieces put together, and just taking that in and seeing how it speaks to yourself and what you get from that. And are you reading into someone's story with their work, or are you inventing your own story from that work?
Mm-hmm. That notion of self and other as a daydream quality is a really nice way to think about the exhibition. I think that's similar even to Erica's work with the clouds and the hair, that kind of daydream quality. Erica, would you like to say a couple things?
Sure. So as Adam just said, we were supposed to have this show back in May, and the work that I had intended to make was vastly different. I was actually supposed to go to Greece, and I was going to make this work encapsulating that experience, being abroad and being a person of color. And then in the midst of not being able to go, it's like our country had a meltdown, and we saw the injustice that we all kind of knew was happening in the background be very violently and very publicly shown to us, and where there was a point where we can't any longer deny that it's happening or try to ignore it. So I feel like my work is always based in the experience that I have, or revolving around race, but it ended up taking on this sort of more of a social justice or a social activism sort of approach in how I want to talk about experiences of people of color, or how I want to include not only just my perspective, but how the Black experience is can be personified through art. And I think it really magnified or intensified during this period where we were seeing people protest. And it was like a moment from the 1960s had somehow resurfaced here in 2020. And I wanted to think about how I could speak more to that.
Oh, thank you for sharing those additional layers for the work. I like what you said about this feeling being magnified and intensified in the current moment. And then kind of a bravery to share those experiences through art. I mean, it's for all artists that there's an inherent act of bravery of putting something of yourself that you've made for an audience to view. And there's others as well, where the meaning shifted as especially the coronavirus continued. Andreas, I know we talked a little bit about this. Would you share some of that experience?
Yeah, so I don't know, I said before that I was kind of thinking about Donald Trump, but maybe in a different way, and specifically having to do with the wall, right? I think I've made a lot of work maybe that was in response to his comments and ultimately his actions as a president, but I don't think any of us really could have foreseen the complete lack of responsibility that kind of came from that. And I feel like even more of this work is not only about the kind of blindness that his xenophobia can kind of impose upon him and other Americans as well. I mean, ultimately, I think this election shows that, but the fact that we only closed our borders to one country and eventually to more, but there's these kind of, it was about the wall and about migrant workers and people migrating from Mexico and Central America, and now it's kind of become something completely different. And I think it's even maybe more powerful now than it was before.
We're still waiting, audience, anyone wants to jump in with a question in the chat, don't be scared. They're all really lovely people. I can personally attest to this. Does anyone else from the collective want to speak to that? How events from what's happening now, how that might have impacted your work?
I mean, sure. I think, yeah, I guess in ways that I wasn't really aware of. I've been working with these images in a very particular way, very specifically for a long time. And this is the first time I've actually changed that, where I'm still but now they're quiet. And I feel like maybe there was maybe I was working from some kind of soft anger or confusion at what is intimacy, right? And why is it now this commodified thing? And now I'm in a period where it has to be virtual and it has to be online and it has to exist on these platforms. And almost thank goodness it does in some way, because maybe this is how people are connecting. So I feel like the images I'm making now are softer and more less aggressive because of the need to connect so badly in a different way.
I'll also give an answer here, which is not very profound or anything, but this year has impacted my work by I just straight up don't write anymore. It's really hard to write a poem when some days it feels like the literal end of the world. There's no profound meaning to that besides it's hard for a lot of people right now. But we're keeping on, and that's, I think, more important than pushing out work sometimes. Yeah.
Absolutely. We do now have a question from Sarah Hamami. She says, a lot of this exhibition seems to have been rooted in location, and I'm wondering, since this was supposed to go up earlier in the year, did being forced to stay inside or in one location change the way you feel about your projects? Really great question. Thank you, Sarah.
I can start with just answering. I had initially planned on doing a couple different videos, performance videos, and they would involve, you know, going to different locations and scouting different locations. And I really just, I mean, it's not like I intended to, but I really just kind of closed in and didn't want to go out into the world that much, just given everything that's happening. And so I ended up sort of landing on that I'm Too Sad to Tell You video, the Bastian Otter cover video, as something I can do. We have a studio in our house, and I was like, I can make that here. And it was like the perfect sentiment that I wanted to get across in this show anyway. And so it just sort of worked out for me. And I know Erica already spoke to it, but her work changed quite a bit because of
Location.
we can't go into other countries.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, definitely. As you know, I said I was supposed to go to Greece, and I was thinking about how other cultures impacted how I saw myself, or how other countries or other people perceive me, being someone traveling to another country and being seemingly foreign. A lot of my work is born out of travel. So this being in quarantine and working from home for like the last 6 months really caused me to do a lot of self-reflecting and think about who I am historically, or, you know, the lineage of why I am the way I am, or how I look at things, and how my, you know, ancestral history has sort of taken a turn into my everyday life. And it really was a great shift between, I think, even how I look at things moving forward from the moments of seclusion and just being alone with my thoughts a lot.
Thanks, Erica. Move on, although I'm sure some of you might have wanted to chip in, because we do have a couple more requests in the chat as we get closer to the end of our event. So we have a request from Carol Mickett for Jess. Would you read part of your poem for us?
Yes, absolutely. It's not very long, so it's kind of hard to pick apart. Is it okay if I just read it? Is that okay? It's also kind of weird to like segment a poem where it's not meant to be. So if that's cool, I'm just gonna read it.
Go for it.
Thanks. It's called After 22 Years, I Decide to Try to Love Florida. I've also never read this poem out loud, so forgive me if I suck. After 22 years, I decide to try to love Florida, which is difficult. So let's not start with the red tide at low tide, or the massive Confederate flag casting its dark shadow over the interstate. No, let's start somewhere a little easier to love. Of course, I watched light glitter off the Hillsborough. Of course, I sunbathed in many a golden hour and thought, damn, I want this sunset to come all over my face. The beautiful parts are always easy to love. Everybody loves an Instagram story. I live where you vacation post. Once I started writing a poem while in bed with this guy, and he said, you would be easier to love if there was less of all this. And I was like, yeah, I get it. That's the Florida in me. The unsavory parts of this place are the punchline. I'm still talking about Florida, at least kind of. Once to that same dude, I was like, I want to love it here so bad. And he was like, you'll move one day. It's okay. And I can't really blame him because we were texting. So he couldn't have known I didn't really mean Florida. I meant here, like I was pointing one finger right at my chest. Thank you.
Snaps. Yes, thank you so much. That was lovely. Thank you so much, Jess. We have a couple lingering questions, so I'll get to Genesis and then Lynn. We'll do brief responses, then we can let everyone go. So quickly, a question from Genesis Vasquez. With everything that has happened this year, what are some things you did to keep your mind open and inspire you to create work? Maybe someone who hasn't chimed in lately.
I can say something. This year I haven't really made, like, I thought about this work differently for the show, but we had a pop-up show, and that one scan of the Polaroid was actually used for that show, but it went up for one night, and I was like, where else am I going to show this? My bedroom? Like, it needs to be put up somewhere. So I thought more a lot about the work, but I started my own business this year full time, and I haven't really had time to make art or work, or we used to meet together like on Fridays at the Bricks, and we talk about art and the shows that we were in. And like Jess said, she hasn't seen us since, like, well, most of us since March. And it's really hard and it feels disconnected, but like this right here feels the most connected personally that I felt to like any art this year. And I miss it a lot. So it has not been smooth for me, at least. There it is.
Did anybody else want to jump in? Okay, I'll move on then to Lynn's comment and question. So Lynn Pearson says, I am so impressed with the articulate visual and verbal expressions by each of the artists' work and how the personal relevance of their work resonates with the times. I'm wondering what directions you see their work moving next.
I can speak on this. Yeah, so another thing I'm part of is called Add2, and part of that is helping students kind of get into the advertising world. But for me, part of it is education. You know, I do feel like there's a missing creative part within some of the schools around us, and I would like to kind of help fill in that gap, and that's how I do with that too. And I could see my work maybe reflecting that. Maybe it's just a 20-minute tutorial on how to cut somebody out of a Photoshop file.
That's wonderful. Anybody else want to jump in quickly? Give us a preview what's going on next.
I can go. So I am finishing my third year at USF, and we're having our thesis exhibition at the end of the spring semester, which I think is now at the end of April instead of May, or the beginning of April rather. Yeah, I'm a part of the third year class right now at the University of South Florida, and there's a lot of really great art coming out of that program as well. So if you're an undergraduate or just an artist that's, you know, has a degree from somewhere else and wants to potentially apply to an art school, USF is a great program. That's kind of what I'm working on now is my thesis work.
Excellent. And again, I promised we're going to conclude, but there's another quick one. What's the next plan for separate checks in the future? Can you reveal, is there anything coming forward or open to?
Well, at the beginning of this year, we wanted to have an open call show, like for the community, where we as a collective get to like jury the show, because every time we have a pop-up, someone is like, how can I be in it? And we were like, oh, well, like we didn't think of that, but of course there's opportunities in different ways. We just have to like work together for that. And of course this year kind of put that on hold, but that's like our next like goal, you know.
Yeah, an open call show for people outside of the collective.
Because Aaron, like he said, he did that cold call to get into the collective because we were just forming, and we've had a lot of messages in the past of people wanting to be in it. And so my solution for that is we have a blog on our website called Not Another Art Blog, and it's where we feature artists. We've been quiet on that right now, but I want to like do more collaborations, work with other collectives, work with other artists. So it's like separate checks but it's still a way to meet new artists, collaborate. If anyone ever feels stuck, like how to create during this time, find like an accountability buddy or go see an art show, like just make that first move to like do something, and then things usually do follow from that one action. So I know it's hard this year.
A wonderful little preview. You heard it here. Go keep an eye out for this open call if you want to work with the wonderful artists of Separate Checks. So thank you, Mark Miller, for that question. Cindy York says, amazing talent. Thank you for sharing. And Selena reminds us, go see it in person. So as we now conclude our event, I want to emphasize Selena's comment here and remind our audience that the show will be open in Gallery 221 at the Dale Mabry campus until December 10th. To see it for yourself, simply book an appointment on our website, hccfl.edu/gallery221. To give you a little preview of what you'll be seeing, we're going to replay a slideshow of the exhibition photographs for you. But thank you so much, each and every one of you that are here with us tonight, and the 2 members who were not present as well. We're so appreciative of your time and so grateful to share your work with our community. All right, lots of waves and hearts. Everyone take care, stay safe, and be well. Have a good night, all.
Thank you, everybody.